When the Apache woman said, "Don't touch me," the cowboy's heart broke forever. The air smelled of dry grass and leather, and the quiet of the early morning was broken only by the low calls of cattle and the occasional rustle of wind through sagebrush. A cowboy named James walked slowly along the edge of the herd, his boots kicking up little clouds of dust. He was a man of few words, but his eyes were sharp, and he knew the land like the back of his hand. For years, he had worked alone, moving cattle across the frontier, sleeping under the stars and trusting only his instincts. Life was simple, but it was also lonely. James was not a cruel man, but he had always kept himself apart from others. He had seen too much sadness in the world to get close to anyone, and the loneliness of the open plains had become familiar, almost comfortable. Yet in the quiet moments before dawn, when the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, he sometimes felt a longing he did not understand. Something in him wanted connection, but he did not know how to find it. Not far from the place where James worked, a small group of Apache people lived near a stream that twisted like a silver ribbon through the dry land. They survived through hunting, gathering, and occasional trading with settlers. Among them was a woman named Ayana. She moved with quiet grace, her presence calm but strong. Her dark eyes seemed to hold stories of loss, strength, and survival. She had grown up learning the ways of her people, understanding the dangers of trusting outsiders too easily. Every action she took was measured, careful, and deliberate. Life had taught her to be cautious, and she carried herself with dignity, always aware of the delicate line between friendship and danger in a world that often judged her unfairly. James first noticed her one morning when he came to trade some supplies with her people. She stood by the small market area, quietly arranging baskets of herbs, beads, and dried food. Her hands were steady and skilled, moving with purpose. When she looked up, her eyes met his for a brief moment, and he felt a strange pull he could not explain. There was something in her calm demeanor, in the way she carried herself, that made him stop and look. He was not a man easily moved by appearances, but in that moment he felt a spark of curiosity, a desire to understand her world, even from a distance. Over the following weeks, James found himself returning to the trading area more often than he needed to. He would help lift heavy sacks, repair fences, or tend to small tasks without being asked. He did not speak much, but his presence was noticed. The Apache people watched him with caution at first, unsure of his intentions. Yana, in particular, observed him closely. She saw that he was different from many others who came to trade. He did not demand respect. He earned it quietly, through actions rather than words. Still, she kept her distance. Life had taught her that appearances could be deceiving, and even the kindest gestures could hide selfish motives. Despite the distance between them, a subtle connection began to form. James felt drawn to her quiet strength, the way she handled herself in the midst of her responsibilities. He began to admire her patience, her resilience, and the careful way she moved through the world. Every encounter, even the briefest, left him thinking about her long after he had returned to his camp. He started to notice small details, the way the morning sunlight caught her hair, the soft rhythm of her footsteps, the gentle way she spoke to the children of her tribe. These observations were not born out of romantic desire alone. They were part of a deeper appreciation for her humanity, her dignity, and her strength. Yana, meanwhile, was aware of James's presence, though she never showed it openly. She noted his actions, his quiet attentiveness, and the respect he showed for her people. It was unusual for a man from outside their community to behave in such a way. She felt a mix of curiosity and caution. She had learned early in life that attachment could be dangerous, that trust was fragile, and that people often hurt those they claimed to care for. Still, there was something in James's demeanor that made her pause and reconsider. He was not like the others. He did not rush, he did not demand, and he did not assume. He simply existed alongside them quietly, respectfully. Days turned into weeks, and James found himself waiting for these small encounters. He did not speak much to Ayanna at first, fearing that words could disrupt the fragile rhythm of their silent understanding. Instead, he focused on simple acts, offering help, repairing broken tools, sharing a smile. Over time, these small gestures began to build a bridge, though it was delicate and tentative. Ayanna allowed him closer, but only to the extent that she felt safe. She never let her guard down completely. There were boundaries she would never cross, walls she had built through experience and necessity. And yet, even within those boundaries, she allowed him a glimpse of her world, a small window into her life, and he cherished every moment. One afternoon, the sun was high and the air shimmered with heat. James had helped repair a broken fence near the trading area, and Ayanna approached him to carry water for the animals. Their hands brushed as they worked, and for a brief instant James felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. He looked at her, and she met his gaze with steady eyes. There was no invitation, no promise, just recognition. In that quiet moment, he realized that his feelings for her were growing stronger, though he did not yet understand the depth of the emotions involved. He felt respect, admiration, and a desire to protect her, even though he knew very little of her past or the experiences that had shaped her. Life continued in this rhythm. Mornings were spent tending to animals and trading goods. Afternoons were filled with small chores, and evenings brought quiet reflection under a sky full of stars. James and Ayanna moved through their days like parallel lines, occasionally intersecting, sharing moments that were fleeting but meaningful. Their connection remained unspoken, delicate, and undefined. For James, these encounters became the highlight of his days. For Ayanna, they were reminders that the world was not entirely harsh, that kindness could exist even in strangers, but they were also cautionary reminders that attachment could be dangerous. In the quiet moments when James returned to his camp, he often found himself thinking about Ayanna. He wondered about her life, her experiences, and the stories hidden behind her calm expression. He imagined the challenges she had faced, the strength required to survive in a world that was often unforgiving. He felt a growing respect for her resilience and a desire to understand more, though he knew he must proceed carefully. His heart was stirring with emotions he had not felt in years, emotions that were both exciting and frightening. Ayanna, too, noticed changes within herself. She felt a sense of curiosity and a subtle warmth in James's presence, yet she remained cautious. She understood that emotions could be complicated, that attachment could bring both comfort and pain. She watched him from a distance, noting his actions and intentions, weighing the risks of allowing herself to feel a connection. Her life had taught her to protect her heart, to guard it against those who might not understand or respect her boundaries. And yet, in quiet moments, she allowed herself a fleeting thought of what might be, even as she reminded herself to remain vigilant. The frontier world was harsh and life was uncertain. Days were long, nights were cold, and dangers lurked in unexpected places. Yet amidst this harshness, a quiet story of connection was unfolding, one that relied on patience, respect, and understanding. James and Ayanna were two souls from different worlds, learning to navigate the fragile bridge between them. Their story had only just begun, and neither knew the full journey that lay ahead. And so, under the endless sky of the frontier, with the golden sun casting long shadows across the land, two people quietly discovered the power of presence, respect, and silent admiration. It was a beginning built on small moments, careful gestures, and mutual awareness, a beginning that would shape the lives of both in ways neither could yet imagine. As the days passed, the quiet rhythm of life on the frontier continued. James found himself drawn to the trading area more and more, even when he did not need supplies. he discovered that the small interactions with Ayanna had begun to shape his days. Even the sight of her quietly moving among the baskets of herbs and beads gave him a strange sense of peace. It was a calm he had not known in years, a feeling that made the long, hard work of the plains seem lighter. He worked his cattle, repaired fences, and tended to his horses with renewed focus, knowing that these moments of ordinary life were now intertwined with the thought of her. James never tried to force a conversation with Ayanna. He had learned through his years of solitude that some connections could not be rushed. Instead, he focused on small, meaningful gestures. If he saw a basket out of place, he would carefully return it to its spot. If a tool was broken, he would quietly fix it and leave it where it would be noticed. He carried water, helped lift supplies, and always offered a steady hand when needed. It was in these actions, subtle but consistent, that he hoped she would see his intentions. He did not speak of friendship or love, for he knew words could complicate things he was not yet ready to understand. Ayanna, for her part, observed him closely. She had seen many outsiders come and go, some with kindness but often with hidden agendas. She had learned that appearances could be deceiving, but James was different. He moved through her world with care, never demanding attention or approval. He respected her space and never acted impulsively. Slowly, she began to notice the consistency of his presence. It was not dramatic or loud. It was quiet and steady, like the flow of a river. She found herself watching him sometimes, wondering why a man from such a different world would be so patient and respectful. Despite her curiosity, Ayanna remained cautious. Life had taught her that emotional closeness could bring pain, and she had endured enough hardships to know the importance of boundaries. She allowed him to help and noticed his kindness, but she never let herself rely on it emotionally. She treated him politely, spoke when necessary, and maintained the careful distance she had always practiced with outsiders. Still, in quiet moments, she found herself appreciating the presence of someone who did not rush, someone who seemed content to simply exist alongside her without expectation. As the frontier days passed, James's feelings grew stronger. He began to imagine her life beyond the trading area, wondering about her family, her history, and the experiences that had shaped her. He did not ask intrusive questions, understanding that some stories were private, but he carried a desire to know more. He watched how she moved through her tasks, noticing the small gestures that revealed her character, the way she handled the children in her care, the patience she showed when dealing with difficult customers, and the quiet determination she displayed in keeping her community safe and organized. Each observation deepened his respect and admiration. One late afternoon, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, James found himself sitting quietly near the stream that ran beside the trading area. He watched the water flow over smooth stones, its gentle sound calming his restless mind. Ayanna appeared nearby, carrying a small basket of herbs. She paused for a moment, looking out over the water, and James felt a strange mix of longing and respect. He wanted to speak to her to bridge the distance, but he also understood the importance of patience. So he remained silent, simply sitting and observing, allowing the quiet moment to exist between them. Over the next few weeks, their encounters became routine, though still carefully measured. James began to notice the patterns of her day, when she tended to the children, when she arranged the goods, when she took a moment to herself by the stream. He tried to synchronize his visits with these moments, not out of manipulation but out of a desire to share small experiences without imposing. Each interaction was brief, a smile, a nod, a word of help. Yet in these tiny exchanges, an unspoken understanding grew. They were learning to communicate without words, building trust through actions rather than conversation. There were moments when James thought he saw a hint of warmth in her eyes, a fleeting acknowledgement of his presence. These moments were brief, disappearing as quickly as they came, leaving him both hopeful and unsure. He understood that the frontier world was not one where emotions could be easily expressed. Life was harsh, and survival often required restraint. Yet he could not ignore the feeling that something significant was quietly forming between them. It was not yet love, perhaps, but it was a connection deeper than friendship. Ayanna, too, felt subtle changes within herself. She noticed the way James moved through the world, careful, steady, respectful, and she found herself curious. She wondered why a man from the outside would show such consistent thoughtfulness. She appreciated his presence, yet she reminded herself to remain cautious. Emotional closeness had always been risky, and she could not forget the lessons of her past. Still, when she saw him helping a child, carrying a basket, or quietly repairing a tool, she felt a sense of ease that was unusual in her interactions with outsiders. It was a small comfort, a gentle reminder that not all people sought to take advantage of others. Their relationship grew in small, almost imperceptible ways. James began to anticipate her needs, offering assistance without waiting to be asked. He would notice when a basket was heavy, when a tool needed mending, or when the children needed supervision. Ayanna noticed these gestures, and though she did not openly express gratitude, she allowed herself to rely on them in small ways. Trust was slow to develop, but it was beginning to form. It was built not on words or promises, but on consistent, thoughtful action. One evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, and the sky turned shades of purple and gold, James and Ayanna found themselves working side by side to carry supplies back to her community's storage area. Their hands brushed briefly as they passed a heavy sack, and James felt a warmth that he could not explain. He looked at her, and she met his gaze with steady eyes. There was no invitation, no expectation, only recognition. In that quiet moment, he realized that his admiration for her had grown into something deeper, though he still did not fully understand it. He felt respect, care, and a desire to protect her, emotions he had not experienced in years of solitary life. Ayanna, sensing his feelings, maintained her calm and careful demeanor. She understood that emotions could be complicated, and that attachment could bring pain as well as comfort. She valued his kindness and presence, but did not allow herself to depend on it emotionally. Life had taught her to guard her heart, to remain cautious even when someone appeared trustworthy. She continued to observe him quietly, allowing small moments of connection without fully letting down her walls. The frontier was full of challenges, from harsh weather to the dangers of the wild. Yet amidst these difficulties, James and Ayanna continued to navigate their growing bond. Their connection was subtle, grounded in respect and patience rather than overt displays of emotion. It was a slow dance, a careful negotiation of trust and understanding. Each day brought new opportunities to observe, help, and learn from each other. They moved together like two rivers running parallel, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but always aware of each other's presence. James often reflected on his feelings in solitude. He wondered how someone could be so strong and so careful, so full of grace, and yet so guarded. He admired her resilience, her dignity, and her wisdom. He realized that connection was not always about words or gestures. Sometimes, it was about simply being present, respecting boundaries, and understanding the limits of others. His admiration for Ayanna had grown into something profound, a quiet longing that he could neither rush nor fully express. Ayanna, too, felt subtle shifts in her own heart. She noticed that she looked forward to his presence, that his steady actions brought a small sense of comfort. Yet she reminded herself to remain vigilant. She had survived by being cautious, by knowing when to open her heart and when to protect it. Even as she allowed herself small moments of curiosity and appreciation, she never let her guard down completely. The line between trust and attachment remained clear in her mind, and she honored it diligently. As the days turned into weeks, the quiet bond between them became stronger, though it remained unspoken. James and Ayanna had learned to communicate through presence, action, and observation rather than words. They had built a delicate bridge of understanding, a connection that was slowly growing but still fraught with caution. Each small interaction carried meaning, and both of them felt the subtle weight of emotions that neither fully named. And so, life continued on the frontier. The sun rose and set, cattle roamed, and the wind whispered through the hills. Amidst the ordinary routines of work and survival, a quiet story of connection unfolded, one built on patience, respect, and mutual understanding. James and Ayanna were learning the slow, careful art of noticing, appreciating, and caring for another person without imposing, without rushing, and without breaking the fragile trust that had begun to form. The morning was quiet, unusually so, with only the distant sound of birds and the occasional lowing of cattle. The sky was pale with the soft light of dawn, and the air carried the subtle fragrance of sagebrush and earth warmed by the early sun. James rode slowly along the trail toward the trading area, his mind preoccupied with thoughts he could hardly name. The connection he felt with Ayanna had grown stronger, though he knew it was delicate, fragile, and entirely unspoken. He wondered what it would mean to bridge the distance completely, to move beyond silent gestures and careful glances. Yet he also knew the dangers of rushing into something he did not fully understand. When he arrived, he found the trading area unusually busy. A small group of outsiders had arrived, loud and impatient, demanding goods and attention. The air became tense, a pressure that seemed to tighten the space around him. James's instincts kicked in immediately. He noticed Ayanna standing quietly near her baskets, calm yet alert, her eyes scanning the newcomers with measured caution. He saw the brief flicker of concern cross her face as the strangers' voices grew louder, their hands reaching for goods without asking permission. James felt a protective impulse rise within him. Without thinking, he approached quickly, keeping his voice low but firm. "Please, they must wait their turn," he said to the outsiders, placing himself subtly between them and Ayanna. The strangers scoffed and muttered, but they backed off just enough to allow a bit of space. Ayanna, meanwhile, watched him with steady eyes. She did not speak, but her hands moved deftly to secure her baskets and protect the children nearby. James felt a surge of admiration and concern. He wanted to ensure her safety, to stand beside her not just as a helper, but as someone who could shield her from harm. In the midst of the chaos, a child tripped over a basket. Without hesitation, James reached out to steady the boy, keeping him from falling. At the same time, he instinctively reached toward Ayanna, as if to ensure she was safe as well. In that instant, their hands brushed and she stepped back sharply, her eyes wide and unwavering. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of finality. James froze, caught off guard by the firmness of her words. It was not anger he saw in her eyes, nor was it fear. It was something deeper, a boundary, a wall built from years of experience and the lessons of her life. Her words were not meant to push him away cruelly. They were meant to protect herself, to assert her limits clearly and decisively. James felt a strange mix of shock, regret, and deep sadness. He had acted instinctively, with only the desire to help, yet in that moment he realized that instinct had crossed a line he did not fully understand. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. James's heart ached in a way it had never ached before. He wanted to explain, to apologize, to tell her that he meant no harm, but he also understood that words could not undo the impact of that moment. Ayanna's gaze remained steady, her posture firm, and her expression calm but resolute. She had drawn a line that could not be crossed, and James recognized that he must respect it, no matter how difficult it was for him. The tension around them slowly eased as the outsiders moved on, distracted by other goods. James stepped back slightly, lowering his hands and allowing the space between them to return. Yana did not speak further, but her presence conveyed a quiet message. She expected him to understand, to respect the boundaries she had set. He nodded silently, not with words but with understanding. In that nod, he acknowledged the lesson she had just taught him, a lesson about respect, patience, and the complexity of human connection. After the moment passed, James moved to help with other tasks, keeping his distance yet remaining nearby. He could feel the ache in his chest, a mix of heartbreak and realization. The connection he had felt with Ayana was not lost, but it had shifted in that instant. He understood that love, admiration, and care must always be balanced with respect for boundaries. His heart broke quietly, not with anger or bitterness, but with the deep, painful awareness that some things could never be forced, and some connections must be handled with care and patience. Yana, meanwhile, continued her work with quiet determination. She did not ignore him, nor did she treat him with hostility. She simply maintained her distance, allowing him to be present without allowing her emotions to be vulnerable. Her actions were deliberate, her movements controlled, and her gaze careful. She had learned the importance of protecting herself, of asserting boundaries clearly and calmly. Her strength was evident in the way she continued her tasks, even in the face of potential danger and emotional complexity. As the day continued, James found himself reflecting deeply on the incident. He understood that his instincts, though well-meaning, had not taken into account the depth of her experiences. He realized that true care for another person meant more than protection or gestures. It meant understanding, patience, and the willingness to honor limits even when it was difficult. The ache in his heart was not just from rejection, but from the recognition of the lessons embedded in her words. The incident left a lasting impression on James. It was a turning point in his understanding of connection, respect, and emotional boundaries. He realized that his admiration for Ayana could not be expressed through impulsive action or physical gestures. It had to be demonstrated through consistent, thoughtful presence, through patience, and through deep respect for her autonomy. The heartbreak he felt was intertwined with a sense of growth, a painful but necessary awakening to the complexities of human relationships. In the quiet hours that followed, James kept a respectful distance, continuing his work without intrusion. He observed Ayana, noting the grace with which she moved, the patience she exhibited, and the quiet strength that defined her. He did not attempt to speak of the incident, knowing that words could not fully convey his understanding or his regret. Instead, he focused on actions, helping where he could, maintaining respect, and ensuring that his presence remained supportive but unobtrusive. Yana noticed his restraint and the subtle acknowledgement of her boundaries. She appreciated his understanding, though she did not verbalize it. Her trust had not shifted, but it had been reinforced by his willingness to respect her limits. She continued her work, carrying on with the responsibilities of her community while remaining aware of his presence. The moment had been significant, yet life on the frontier demanded resilience, focus, and composure. By evening, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. James sat quietly, reflecting on the events of the day. He thought about Ayana's words, the firmness of her gaze, and the quiet strength that radiated from her every movement. He realized that his admiration for her was deeper than he had understood, a combination of respect, care, and something more tender, something that required patience and understanding. He vowed to honor her boundaries, even if it meant enduring his own heartbreak silently. For Ayana, the day was a reminder of the importance of caution and self-protection. She had lived her life learning to navigate a world that often misunderstood or threatened her people. She had faced countless challenges that required vigilance and strength. Her words to James were not meant to punish or push him away, but to assert her autonomy and ensure her emotional safety. She moved through the evening with calm determination, her heart guarded yet not unkind. The events of that day left an indelible mark on both of them. James had learned a painful but vital lesson about respect, patience, and understanding. Yana had reinforced the importance of boundaries and careful observation in relationships. Their connection, though changed, remained present, quiet, respectful, and layered with complexity. It was a connection that would continue to grow, shaped by mutual understanding, thoughtful actions, and the unspoken acknowledgement of each other's inner strength. As night fell over the plains, the stars began to appear, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. James gazed upward, thinking of Ayana and the lessons of the day. He felt the ache in his heart, the quiet sadness of understanding too late that some gestures, however well-intentioned, could not replace patience and respect. Yet he also felt a quiet determination. He would continue to be present, to learn, and to honor her boundaries, even if it meant carrying the heartbreak alone. Yana, in her small dwelling nearby, looked out at the same stars. She thought of James and the quiet understanding that had passed between them. She felt no anger, only cautious acknowledgement of the care he had shown and the lesson he had received. She understood that some connections were delicate and must be treated with care. Her words, "Don't touch me," had been necessary, and they had shaped the future of their relationship. It was a moment neither would forget, a moment that defined boundaries, respect, and the complexity of human hearts. And so, life on the frontier continued. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, the cattle grazed quietly, and the sky held the promise of another day. Amidst the ordinary routines and challenges, a profound moment had occurred, one that would shape both James and Ayana forever. He had learned the cost of impulsive action, and she had reinforced the power of self-protection. Their lives remained intertwined, connected by silent understanding, mutual respect, and the lessons learned from a single, pivotal moment. After that day, the quiet rhythm of the frontier felt different to James. The land, the cattle, and the open skies remained the same, yet his heart carried a heaviness that was new and unfamiliar. He had faced hard work, long journeys, and isolation before, but nothing had left him feeling so deeply unsettled. Yana's words, simple yet firm, "Don't touch me," echoed in his mind not as a punishment, but as a clear boundary he could not ignore. He understood the strength behind her words and the wisdom in her caution, but his heart still ached with longing. For days, James kept a careful distance. He continued his work, tending cattle and repairing fences, but he no longer sought out the brief interactions he had once cherished. He watched the trading area from afar, noticing the rhythm of Ayana's movements, her careful attention to her people, and the steady way she maintained her responsibilities. He felt admiration and respect, but now it was tinged with sadness. Every glance at her reminded him of what he could not have, and yet he could not turn away. The pull of connection was strong, even when tempered by the knowledge that he must respect her boundaries. Yana, on her part, maintained her calm and careful demeanor. She noticed James's restrained presence and understood the unspoken sorrow that lingered in him. She felt no anger, only a quiet acknowledgement of the complexity of human emotion. She continued her work with her usual diligence, carrying out the responsibilities of her community, tending to the children, and managing the daily needs of her people. Yet in the quiet moments between tasks, she allowed herself a brief awareness of James's presence, a recognition of the connection that had formed between them, fragile though it was. James found himself thinking often about what he had done and what he had felt. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, considering how a single, impulsive gesture had changed everything. He wished he could take it back, not because he had acted with ill intent, but because he realized how little he truly understood the depth of her experiences and the strength of her boundaries. He had assumed that his care and protection could bridge the distance between them, Yet he learned that understanding and respect were far more important than any action, no matter how well-meaning. Days turned into weeks, and James's presence became more subtle. He no longer sought to help directly, but he continued to be near enough to offer assistance when it was clearly needed, always from a respectful distance. He learned to watch without intruding, to support without demanding attention, and to care without crossing the line she had drawn. The ache in his heart did not disappear, but it became a quiet companion, a reminder that love and respect were not always the same, and that sometimes caring deeply meant restraining one's own desires. Gianna noticed this change in him and appreciated the effort. She saw the respect in his eyes, the patience in his actions, and the silent acknowledgement of her words. Her trust did not deepen in a dramatic way, but it solidified quietly. She allowed herself to notice him without fear, to accept his presence without vulnerability. She recognized that the moment of boundary setting had created a shift, one that allowed both of them to understand each other more clearly. The interaction had been painful for James, but it had also been an essential lesson in respect, and she valued the wisdom that came with such understanding. Life on the frontier carried on as it always had, with its mixture of labor, beauty, and unpredictability. James continued his daily routines, but he carried a new awareness within him. He understood that connection with another human being was not about possession, nor was it about control. It was about understanding, patience, and the willingness to honor boundaries even when it hurt. Each day, he practiced this quietly, showing his care through small, thoughtful actions rather than grand gestures. Whether it was tending to the cattle, repairing a broken tool, or quietly observing from a distance, he learned to express his feelings without overstepping. Gianna continued her work with her community, mindful of the balance between caution and trust. She recognized that James had learned the lesson of respect, and she allowed herself a gentle awareness of his presence. It was a delicate balance, one that required attention and mindfulness. She moved through her tasks with grace, protecting her heart while acknowledging the subtle bond that existed between them. Her life had taught her the importance of boundaries, and she carried that knowledge with quiet dignity, even as she observed the care he continued to show. Despite the distance, small moments of connection continued to occur. A gentle nod, a shared glance, or a brief exchange of assistance became meaningful in ways words could not capture. Each of these interactions reinforced the lessons both had learned. James about the importance of restraint and respect, Gianna about the subtle acknowledgement of kindness without compromising boundaries. The bond between them was no longer impulsive or naive. It was tempered by experience, patience, and quiet understanding. James often spent evenings reflecting by the fire, thinking about the lessons of the day and the depth of his emotions. He recognized that heartbreak was a part of life, but that it could also be a teacher. He thought about Gianna not as someone to possess, but as someone whose strength and resilience commanded admiration. He understood that true care sometimes meant enduring sadness silently, honoring the autonomy of the other person, even when it conflicted with personal desire. In this reflection, he found a quiet wisdom that grounded him and allowed him to continue living fully, even with the ache in his heart. Gianna, meanwhile, found comfort in her routine and the small gestures of care James continued to offer. She appreciated his presence without needing it to change her life or her choices. She recognized that he had learned the most important lesson, that caring for another person meant respecting them completely, including the boundaries they had set. In the quiet moments of the day, she could acknowledge this without letting down her guard, understanding that their connection had transformed into something deeper, more enduring, and more respectful than fleeting attraction or impulsive emotion. The seasons began to shift. The air grew colder, and the first hints of frost appeared on the plains. Life continued with its mix of work, survival, and quiet reflection. James and Ayanna moved through their days with an awareness of each other that was subtle yet profound. Their bond was no longer built on proximity or physical gestures, but on mutual understanding, patience, and the shared experience of learning from one another. Even in the silence between them, there was meaning, a quiet acknowledgement of connection without overstepping boundaries. James often thought about the lessons that had been taught to him in such a brief yet powerful moment. He understood that love, admiration, and respect were not always expressed in the same way, and that sometimes the deepest connections were those that required patience, humility, and restraint. The ache in his heart remained, but it had transformed into a quiet awareness, a gentle guide that reminded him of the value of understanding, empathy, and self-control. Yana continued her work with the children and the community, mindful of the subtle ways in which James's presence had shifted. She recognized that he had learned the importance of boundaries, and she allowed herself a quiet acknowledgement of his care. Their connection existed in a space that was neither distant nor close, a delicate balance that required both attention and respect. In this space, both found lessons, growth, and an understanding that would remain with them for years to come. By the time evening fell, the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the plains were bathed in the soft glow of twilight. James sat quietly by his campfire, reflecting on the days that had passed. He realized that heartbreak could be a teacher, that sorrow could deepen understanding, and that patience and respect could form bonds stronger than impulsive action ever could. Yana's words, though firm and unyielding, had opened a door to a deeper comprehension of human connection, one that he would carry with him forever. Yana, watching the fading light from her home, felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The boundary she had set had been honored, the lesson she had imparted had been understood, and the bond between them had transformed into something more meaningful and enduring. She felt no bitterness, only a gentle recognition of the subtle power of respect, patience, and careful attention. The connection remained, quietly alive, and both of them carried the lessons learned in their hearts. And so, life continued on the frontier, shaped by labor, resilience, and small moments of understanding. The ache in James's heart remained, but it was tempered by wisdom and respect. Yana continued to lead her life with dignity, mindful of the delicate balance between caution and connection. Their story, though marked by heartbreak and boundaries, was also marked by growth, empathy, and the quiet beauty of understanding another human being. The seasons continued to change across the frontier, each day blending into the next with its mix of labor, quiet reflection, and small moments of beauty. James had settled into a new rhythm, one shaped by patience, respect, and understanding. The ache in his heart, born from that moment when Ayanna had firmly said, "Don't touch me," had softened over time. It never fully disappeared, but it became a quiet companion, a reminder of lessons learned, of boundaries honored, and of love expressed through restraint rather than possession. James continued his work with the cattle, the fences, and the land that had been his constant companion for years. Yet now, each task carried with it a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. He was mindful of Ayanna and her presence, observing without intrusion, helping when truly needed, and honoring the distance she required. Every small gesture, every moment of quiet assistance, became a way to express care without overstepping. Through this, he discovered a deeper form of connection, one that did not demand closeness, but found meaning in understanding, patience, and respect. Yana moved through her days with her usual grace and diligence. She continued to lead her community, tending to children, managing supplies, and preserving the traditions and safety of her people. She noticed James's careful presence, the way he respected her boundaries, and the quiet thoughtfulness in his actions. She did not express these observations openly, nor did she need to, but she carried a quiet awareness of the bond that had formed between them. It was subtle, unspoken and tempered by years of caution and life experience, yet it was real and enduring. Time passed, and James found moments of reflection under the wide, starry skies. He thought often of Ayana, not with desire to possess or change her, but with deep respect and admiration. He recalled her strength, her patience, and the lessons she had imparted to him in that single, pivotal moment. He understood that love, at its truest, was not about control, possession, or expectation. It was about honoring another person's heart, respecting their boundaries, and offering care without insisting on reciprocity. The lesson had been painful, but it had shaped him profoundly. Gianna, too, reflected on the connection in her own quiet way. She recognized the care James continued to show, the restraint with which he approached her, and the respect he had developed. She appreciated these qualities deeply, though she never needed to voice it. Life had taught her that understanding, patience, and mutual respect were far more valuable than fleeting gestures or impulsive emotion. In her mind and heart, she acknowledged that the bond between them, though subtle and restrained, was meaningful. It was a connection built on understanding, not possession, and it was one she could accept without fear or compromise. One day, as James worked near the edge of the trading area, he noticed Ayana by the stream, her hands busy gathering herbs and tending to small tasks. He approached slowly, keeping his distance, and offered a small gesture, a basket of fresh water for her and the children nearby. She glanced up briefly, nodded in acknowledgement, and returned to her work. There was no need for words. The gesture itself conveyed understanding and care. In that simple interaction, both felt the quiet strength of the connection that had grown between them over the months and years. It was a connection built not on words, but on shared experience, respect, and thoughtful action. The months turned into years. James and Ayana continued their lives on the frontier, each shaped by the lessons of patience, respect, and emotional maturity. James had grown wiser, understanding that love and care were often demonstrated in quiet ways rather than through dramatic gestures. He had learned that the heart could ache and yet grow stronger through restraint, that connection could flourish without possession, and that respect for boundaries was a true act of love. Ayana, in turn, continued to guide her community with grace and diligence. She had seen James grow through his understanding of her boundaries, and appreciated the silent acknowledgement of care he consistently demonstrated. She knew that his heart had been touched by the lessons she had taught, and she recognized the depth of his respect and admiration. Though she never allowed herself to become fully vulnerable, she carried a quiet appreciation for the presence of someone who had learned to honor her limits, someone who had grown wiser through patience and reflection. Over time, James came to see the beauty in the quiet moments of their connection. A shared glance across the trading area, a nod of acknowledgement, or the simple act of offering help without expectation became meaningful. He no longer sought closeness in the way he once had. Instead, he found fulfillment in understanding, in being present, and in honoring the lessons of restraint. Each day carried a sense of purpose beyond survival, a deeper meaning born from emotional growth, respect, and thoughtful observation. Gianna, similarly, found comfort in the subtle bond they shared. She no longer feared the presence of someone who cared, because she had witnessed the depth of his understanding. She recognized that he had learned to love not through possession or impulsive action, but through careful attention, patient presence, and unwavering respect. Their connection existed quietly, unspoken yet profound, and it became a part of the rhythm of life on the frontier. Years later, James would reflect on the moment that had changed everything. He would remember the firmness in Ayana's eyes, the calm authority in her words, and the lesson she had imparted with the simple phrase, "Don't touch me." That moment had broken his heart, yes, but it had also shaped his understanding of human connection in ways that nothing else could. He had learned that love was not about satisfying desire or overcoming boundaries, but about honoring another person's heart while nurturing one's own growth. Iana, too, would remember the lessons of their connection. She had seen James learn and grow, and she had witnessed the power of patience, respect, and understanding. She understood that their bond was rare and valuable precisely because it had been formed through careful attention and thoughtful action rather than impulsive emotion. She carried the memory of his heartache and his growth as a quiet acknowledgement of the human capacity for empathy, patience, and enduring respect. Their lives continued, shaped by the lessons of the past but moving forward with hope, resilience, and quiet fulfillment. James remained on the frontier, his heart tempered by understanding, his actions guided by the respect he had learned to offer. Iana continued to lead her community with grace and strength, her presence a constant reminder of the power of dignity, patience, and wisdom. The bond between them, though unspoken, remained a profound part of their lives, a connection that shaped who they had become and how they interacted with the world around them. Even in solitude, James could feel the presence of that bond. It was not a presence that demanded or required closeness. It was gentle, quiet, and enduring. He understood that some connections are meant to teach rather than to fulfill desire, to guide rather than to possess. The lessons he had learned from Iana had shaped his heart forever, leaving him wiser, more patient, and more capable of understanding the complexities of human emotion. Iana, too, recognized the lasting impact of their connection. She had taught through example, asserting her boundaries with clarity and calm. She had guided without forcing, and in doing so, she had created a space for James to learn, reflect, and grow. Their connection, though subtle and carefully maintained, had endured over time, leaving both of them with lessons that would remain for the rest of their lives. As the sun set across the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, James and Iana moved through their separate worlds, aware of the quiet bond that connected them. It was not a bond of ownership or expectation, but of mutual understanding, respect, and enduring admiration. In this quiet acknowledgement, they both found peace. His heart, once broken by misunderstanding and impulsive action, had healed into a steady, patient form of care. Her heart, ever cautious, had recognized the power of trust honored and boundaries respected. In the end, the story of James and Iana was not one of dramatic romance or sudden resolution. It was a story of patience, understanding, and the quiet strength of human connection. It was a story of learning to love not by taking, but by observing, respecting, and nurturing from a distance. It was a story that taught both of them, and anyone who might hear it, that love can be profound even when it is subtle, and that respect can shape hearts as deeply as passion ever could. The frontier continued to stretch endlessly under the sky, and life moved on with its usual rhythm. Yet within that rhythm, the lessons of respect, patience, and thoughtful care remained alive. James carried them in his heart as he worked and wandered the land. Iana carried them in her quiet awareness as she led her people. And though their paths were separate, the bond they had formed, born of heartbreak, respect, and understanding, remained eternal, a testament to the enduring power of human connection.